Hi, it's Dr. Sarah Gordon of the PhD Journey Unplugged podcast. I am here today with Brady Hoover. Welcome, Brady.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me. I've been a fan of your podcast since I first heard it, and I'm excited to be a guest now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to just show our listeners because it's mid-April. A lot of people have tulips.
Oh, the snow squall stopped.
Where are you? We have a winter wonderland today.
Yeah, I'm in Newburyport, Massachusetts. So, yeah, we're getting a coating today, and we had a snow squall, and I think this is the latest we've had snow. I mean, we've had our April Fool's Day storm back when I was a kid. I think I was in fifth grade, third, fourth, or fifth grade. I remember the school, and we got 30 inches of snow. And I was joking with my wife. I said, "It's not April Fool's today. Like this shouldn't be happening."
But the interesting thing is that, and I'm going to introduce you and introduce our podcast, but just to let our listeners know before we get started, the Boston Marathon is in 2 weeks, right? Or well,
Yeah,
it's on
yeah,
Monday. It's April
Monday. Yeah,
20th.
so 13 days technically, but who's counting, right?
So Brady's doing the Boston Marathon on April 20th. So we want to start out by saying we hope you have an amazing race. And I know, that you're a strong runner, and I'm sure you've put a lot of preparation into showing up for the 20th, and we hope that it's not snowing like that.
Yeah, we're gonna go from cold to heat, and that is something we won't be prepared for.
Well, maybe we'll talk about that today. We have a lot to get through today. We're gonna talk about like the joy of coaching because Brady, the first time we talked, I sensed so much passion for what you do, and I just very inspired by that. So we're going to talk about different aspects of coaching and how we can encourage people and whatever you're doing in your life. It's not just athletically. I mean, if you're going after academic goals or professional goals or making, setting goals for your personal life, we can approach it in different ways. We don't always have to be so driven by performance metrics, and we can think of it a little bit more comprehensively. And that's kind of what I really admire about your philosophy, which we'll get into, is it really looks at mentorship and working with people to help them towards those goals. I have had incredible coaches on the show, starting at episode 50. Actually, episode 49, I had a life coach on here, Andrew Schubauer, but I've had a lot of like multi-sport athletic coaches on here too. And there's so much to learn from you guys. So this is a great platform to educate and to help other people move their lives forward. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I like to call you guys and everybody out there who's crushing their goals. I came up with this new term. Hopefully, if it's out there already, I apologize, but I think I made it up. I don't know. Resilience warriors. I like that.
I have not heard it used like that before. Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe I created it. These are resilience warriors. These are people who go out there and, it's not easy to train for some of these things. Boston Marathon, Ironmans, double Ironmans, that I think it's called the Epic Deca. I have a guest coming on in June who's done. I mean, these ultra endurance events, they push us. They push us to places. Allison Freeman just said it on the last podcast episode, the type two happiness,
Mhm.
pushing ourselves into these spaces that are uncomfortable so we can grow and learn more about ourselves. So I am, I say the strength for the journey within. And so that's it. That's what we're going to talk about today. So a little bit about Brady. You're a USA Triathlon certified coach, right? And
Mhm.
I was impressed. You have the American College of Sports Medicine personal training certification. That's a hard one.
Yes.
Um,
It was
yeah,
yeah, it was a tough one. The language and very medical driven, very medical driven,
it is.
which a trainer that mentored me for a little while, was mentioned it was the gold standard. I didn't know. I knew about ACSM, I knew about NASM, ACE,
Mm-hmm.
And now when people ask me what I asked him, what training certification should I go for? And I say, well, it depends. Like, what kind of setting do you want to work on? I wish I knew this earlier. I do love having ACSM, but it didn't really teach you how to train clients. It taught you about the heart, the cardiovascular system, musculoskeletal system. I say it's really good for if you want to go work in a clinical setting, like a physical therapist's office, where you have your physical therapist, and then they'll say, "Well, Brady's going to come over here and show you how to do these exercises," right? So I felt like I'm glad I got it. I wouldn't change it for the world, but I knew I needed more education before I actually started training, clients, like more pro. Yeah, I knew how to write a program, but um, I knew how to write a program for me and others like me, but not the whole population. And that's what I needed to work in a gym setting. So now, I have to have a conversation with a to-be trainer to see what are their goals and aspirations and, what direction should I point them in.
Well, and that's a really excellent observation because the ACSM, they have the whole platform exercise is medicine. So it really does give you an appreciation for a lot of the people that are overcoming chronic illnesses and finding their way back into fitness. Maybe they've had heart disease, or they're cancer survivors, or other things that just health challenges. And so it gives you an appreciation of understanding how important physical activity is to find your way forward towards better health. So I agree with you. Like that, I think that's a great foundation. And then build in terms of programming. I mean, they do have exercise prescriptions, but in terms of programming, NSCA and like you said, NASM,
Mhm.
NASM. I don't know if I said that correctly, but there's a lot that get more into like the actual programming for strength and endurance training. So I also have here that you're Ironman certified coach,
Mhm.
okay, and a five-time Boston marathoner. And I can't even believe this number, but your fastest Boston marathon is 2 hours, 48 minutes, and 40 seconds,
Yeah, 2019.
2019. So what's the goal this year?
Party pace this year. Party pace this year. We'll get
What
we'll
does
get
that
into
mean?
it.
What does that mean?
That means just I've run Boston all kinds of different ways. I've had my best race there. I've had my worst race there. I've ran on 85-degree days. I ran in 2018 when it was like the worst recorded weather in Boston history.
Okay.
Um, I've gone into it not trained in 2021 when it was moved to the fall because of COVID and my daughter was approaching a year old. If it was in the spring, no problem. She was young enough that I could feed it in. I got no training in. I blew up at mile 10 and I could only go a quarter mile before I had to walk again. Because it was just that blown up. I said I wouldn't. I was qualified for the spring as well in 2022, and I decided, yeah, no, I'm not gonna. It's not gonna get any better, and I let my streak go out the wayside. I just couldn't put myself through that again. I've Yeah, in the bad weather, the good weather, ran at a slow pace. Feeling slow for me, feeling good at the finish line any way you run Boston and experience Boston, it always delivers, is what I'm getting at. Like whether it's a good race, a bad race, it's just even if you're having a bad race or a hot race or going in underprepared, it's changing that mindset and finding in saying, I'm going to do this to change that mindset. Like when I blew up at Mile 10, I said, I'm going to high five every kid. I'm going to pet every dog. I'm going to inspire the next generation of runners. I'm not going to pull myself off the course because there's so many people that can't do this, that want to do this, that can't do it. And here I am like, there's nothing wrong with me. There's no reason I can't finish. It's just going to take me a long time at this point. At mile 10, I got 16 miles to go. I can't just stop, you know?
That's so cool. I'm curious, where does that come from? That type of mindset? I think it's great. I think it's so positive. And I've seen pictures of you. I love your pictures you shared, and I did use on some of the marketing for this podcast episode. You just have such, excitement and positivity. So how do you, let's just say, okay, if you're listening to this and you're going after some goal and you're feeling like it's not going the way you want it to go. How do you shift that?
It's always going into a race with you have your A plan on the perfect day when everything comes together. You have a B plan, a C plan, and what can I accept?
Okay.
So just having those goals, it's nice to chase something, but when, the training cycle's maybe not going the way that you anticipated when you set this goal out, I'm gonna PR at Boston. It's January right now, hypothetically. A PR in Boston, fitness is good. You're going in with a good base. You did your speed work in the off season and you laid the foundation, and then you start getting into your training and life happens and things that are just out of your control. And it's just being able to pivot. Okay, well, this isn't going to plan. I'm not going to be with a PR. What could be my B goal? Maybe it's another achievable time. That's a little bit more conservative. Um, maybe it's I'm not going to have the time to train. So when I show up to Boston, I mean, I grew up in Massachusetts, so I know somebody along the way everywhere. So it's like, well, I know at mile 2 I'm going to see Carrie, and I know at mile 3 I'm going to see some Alzheimer's friends that I used to run with back in the day, and it's just giving yourself permission to, okay, I'm just going to take this and I'm going to use it to
Have fun with
say
it.
hello to friends, and then you stop and they say, why are you stopping? Keep running, and it's like, no, I'm just going to enjoy this, like enjoy this day. I put in the hard work in the previous fall to get here, and it's not my day, and find another way to kind of turn it around. At the end of the day, it's like I love this sport. I coach athletes because I want to give back to the sport. Um, I want to help them to their goals, but I also want to help them, make realistic decisions in their training and their goals. And when things aren't going into a plan, some people feel defeated, and it's, how can we turn that around? How can we I don't know. My father-in-law says I can make I can make lemonade out of lemons. So that's what I try to do for people.
Well, let me ask you this, and we'll get to our questions, but and you know what we planned. But I'm just curious since we're talking about this, it just came up. Like, oh gosh, I lost my train of thought. That's not good. No, I know what I was gonna say. Does it matter if you show up more serious? Like, have you seen a difference in your actual performance outcome if you show up more serious about it or more lighthearted about it? You know what I mean? Like, do you
I've had
think it
both.
matters how you show up on race day?
Uh, yes and no. I've had when I ran my PR, I showed up. I meant business. I knew I put the training in, and I was going to be
Okay.
smart about it. And I was going to hold back and not get carried away. Um, And then and that was, one or two races that went like that, where I was just like, I put in the work, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to start out too fast and get carried away. I'm going to stick to my goal. I'm going to try to have some fun, but, it's all focused on the yellow line, right?
Hmm.
Um, and then I've had amazing races where I've shown up and I'm like, not even trained for this thing, or,
That's
I'm lightly
interesting.
trained for this thing. And you go out and you run a really good time. You're like, wow, I did not expect that. Like you start off and you're looking at your heart rate and things look good. And you're like, well, I'm just going to ride this wave and see where it takes me. It could go well. It could end badly.
So,
Let's just
so
see where
what's
it brings us.
so what's the silver lining there? What do you think? I'm just curious. Is a lot of different things?
Yeah, a lot of different factors.
That's interesting.
Yeah, what it's like in coaching athletes too, it's like when we know we've all put in the work and we put in the training and the numbers are there and we're feeling good in the days leading up to the race. We're feeling good, 2 days before, the day before. Where the data's telling us we're meant to have a good day.
Okay.
And most of the times we will because we put in that work. There's sometimes that just unforeseen things happen.
Mhm.
Um, and that's just it's not how we fall down, but at that point, it's how we pick ourselves up and change our attitude.
That's a strong statement there. It's true. It's true. That's a good statement for life, you know,
Mhm.
not necessarily just athletics, but just everything in life.
Yeah, I feel like everything with athletics, it's so relatable to real world, right? Motivation, goal setting, discipline. Um, as athletes, we're that. But then, in life, where it just happened to be that way too. I'm that way with my kids and their sports and
Mhm.
my work and my profession, and it just seems to carry over. When I used to work at a gym and I was hiring people, if they put things down like they were involved in club soccer or club running or whatever it is in those kind of electives, I it kind of piqued my interest. I said, okay, this person knows how to budget their time, right? Because we can't do all these things if we're not good time budgeters.
Right.
They know how to budget their time. They're disciplined. They're goal oriented. You ask them to do something, they're gonna do it. They're gonna be a good employee.
Yeah, I mean,
It doesn't have to be. It doesn't even have to be athletic related. It's just when you see those things, those qualities in somebody that shows discipline, shows that they're doing more than just they're doing electives. They're involved. They could be involved in debate club or something like that. It just shows discipline and sacrifice and time management. Those are all
mhm.
good qualities.
I said on the last episode in the beginning, because I get questions like, your podcast is called the PhD Journey, but you focus a lot on like health and human performance. Well, my PhD is in health and human performance, so I'm
Yeah.
I'm interested in it. But I do think, like you're saying, the discipline that you need to get through a PhD program, you see a lot of that in athletics as well. And so I think the lessons learned and the journeys are very similar when you put yourself into situations that require focus, discipline, consistency, hard work. You don't get to a 2 hour, 48 minute, 40 second Boston Marathon time without a lot of hard work. You don't complete an Ironman without a lot of hard work. And you said something to me before we got started because I did like a confession to a coach moment before we started
Yeah.
recording about my own program right now. It's a little derailed, but I'm getting there, slow and steady, and getting there. Life happens, and sometimes you got to ride that wave a little bit. But you said something that's really important. You said, and I wrote it down for myself too, so I'll say it slowly. If you're listening, you need to write this down. It's from Brady Hoover. When motivation drops, it's discipline that keeps us going. You need to ask yourself, what is my why? What other goals can I make, can I accept that are realistic? You need to figure out how to ignite that spark. It, I mean, that says it all. When motivation drops, it's discipline that keeps us going.
Hmm.
And so it doesn't always feel great, but when we put these things into our lives consistently, um, it helps us get towards our goals. And ultimately, we want to live successful lives, right? In your job, in your personal life, parenting, all these things. So discipline, you know, it's um it's a secret ingredient,
Yeah, yeah, it's
maybe,
something that's taught.
amongst
I
other
think taught at
things.
a young age too. As
Yeah.
I think back in my school, swimming competitively in third, fourth, and fifth grade, and at that point we were starting to get homework assignments, and I was still going to swim practice for 2 hours a day, and wanted to ride bicycles with my buddies, like BMX we were into at the time, and mountain biking, and yeah, it was just learning, okay, I gotta go to school, I gotta swim. There's sort of time for it all. It's just, I think it gets created at a young age.
Well, I was
So I
going to
tell
ask you
parents,
how
it
you
doesn't
found,
matter what activities you put your children in, whether it's
right?
sports or my daughter does dance and she's big into that. I guess that's a sport. Um, it could be gardening, right? It's just that time management, that budgeting, that I'm doing this gardening because I have this goal. This summer, I want to be able to eat everything that I've grown myself. Um,
Oh, I love that.
and it's something that teaches responsibility. I got to go out there and I got to plant it. I got to take care of it.
Mhm.
I'm speaking from a child. These kind of traits, and I think that those things that start at a young age, they just kind of get carried on through the years, um, and they translate into adulthood as good values.
Mhm. Yeah, I was going to ask you, how you found how you found your way into all the endurance sports that you do now. So, and I did mention before we started to record, I have had a lot of people on the show. I've interviewed a lot of people through my research at all different age ranges, right? So, you're in 40,
Mhm.
and I would consider you a younger coach, but you've had these habits that were formed early on that you're now able to, teach other people how to find their way into this. So thank you for sharing that because I was going to ask you that.
Yeah.
So you're a competitive swimmer. Were you a runner when you were younger?
No, I just played soccer growing up.
Okay, but running was, you were
Running was part
conditioned
of
as a runner.
soccer, and then when I got into 11v11 soccer, I was always either center mid or left mid, which anyone that knows the game of soccer, um, center mid is your offense and defense you run the most in a game. Left and right mids do as well, but yeah, I was primarily center or left mid. So yeah, it just built that foundation that I tapped into after college when I played intramural soccer because I didn't want to do all the sacrifice of I had I went to a community college and then transferred to UMass and I had 2 years there and I'm like, I don't know if I want the 2 years of my college experience being like sports all the time. Like I did that up until this point. I just want to play recreational. I want to play it for fun. I want to study. I want to, experience being on my own.
Tell us before we actually we still haven't gotten started, I guess, technically. We,
Let's
we
dive into it.
prepare for these things, but then sometimes it just, it's unplugged. Tell us about the Ironman. Which ones have you done and what did you learn from the Ironman?
Yeah, so I had never in my life did I dream of doing an Ironman. Maybe I thought I would do one one day, but when I was younger, yeah, not in the cards. My dad had done one. He did Sunapee back in the day when, gosh, that must have been in the early 90s.
That's cool.
That doesn't exist anymore. But yeah, it was a tough race. I remember it was like 6 loops on the bike and a lot of climbing in that area. Um,
So wait,
and
how old were you when you saw your dad do the Ironman?
I was probably between 8 and 12.
So that's cool. I mean, you saw that very early on with your dad. That's cool.
Yep. Yep. He would run the Boston Marathon. I think he ran it 6 or 7 times, so I'd
Okay.
watch him every year and now he watches me.
That's awesome.
And I
We
hope
got
I
to get
can,
him. Let's get him on the
yeah,
show.
we should.
Let's do that.
And now
Ask
he
him,
watches me. Now
okay?
I got my son, he watches me. And
That's awesome.
yeah, it's good. And I hope that I'm still running when my son if son and daughter, if they decide to take up this sport, I hope I can run that race with, this race with them.
Yeah,
I'm in it for longevity, not just performance, but I don't want to burn my body out. I don't want to ruin my knees. That's why I think
right.
triathlon's the best sport because it allows me to run, which is my favorite sport.
So, do you think you'll continue to do Ironman or stay more just on running?
Yeah, I would love to get back to the iron distance.
Hmm.
It's a time commitment. For me, I got a young family. I got a Zoe just turned 6. Declan turns 8 in May. I coach my son's soccer team. Um, I want to be around on the weekends.
Right. It takes a
Like,
lot of time.
yeah, I
You
could
have,
I could sacrifice for 6 months, but I
hmm.
always think like I just don't get this time back with them, and I'm not okay with that.
Right. That's a really
Um,
important statement. I
I
think when
can
you,
train for marathons because I start my runs at 5 a.m. in the
right,
summer. So I take my serious rate is a little different in the winter, hence like I'm not going into Boston. I told you earlier on that I'm going to run at party pace because it's hard to start at 5 a.m. when you're running for 2 hours in the dark.
right.
I do like running in the dark, but and not for 2 hours. Like there's something about being under the stars and running and nobody on the roads. But um,
No, but you got to make space for it. And
yeah,
when
and
you
I'm
go
not.
after big goals, sometimes you have to let something go. And this is important
Yeah,
time in
yeah, and you
parenting.
can't.
So you
It's
don't want
hard
to
to
let that
have
go, you
goals. Like
know?
you
Yeah.
have to sacrifice a little of something.
Hmm.
Um, and it's like, well, I did Louisville in 2016 and knew I wanted to do another because I was at the time I was going for time. I wanted the experience, but I was also going for time. And I'm like, I
Hmm.
can't put this much time in year after year like some athletes do. I need a year on, a year off to really develop speed and power, and then I'll come back and
Hmm.
do it. And I think and some people do, 2 a year. I don't know how they do it. Um, but yeah, I like spending time with the wife. I like spending time with the kids. So I'm willing to sacrifice
Balance.
Ironman. I still have that dream of qualifying for Kona, which I was going after in 2020 at Tremblant. And then we all know the world stopped in 2020 and we had our second child. And I said, okay, well, this sport is not going anywhere. I may not be as fast as I once was, but I'm only competing against my fellow age groupers. If I train for short course, I like to say strong before long, fast before far. I can maintain my speed and then to
Wait,
get ready
wait,
for
Brady, say that again. Strong,
strong before long, fast before far.
strong before long, fast before far.
And this is where I'll help out athletes that have goals and want to spend time with their families, but also have their goals of maybe it's qualifying for Boston one day, maybe it's qualifying for World 70.3 or simply just finishing. The I say, when you can't fit it all in,
Hmm.
um, the hard it's hard work getting ready for an Ironman, but it's a lot of stamina building, right? When we start preparing for an Ironman, we're trying to build stamina for that specific event. At
Okay.
that point, we're letting go and we're maintaining our speed. We're not trying to go get faster,
Hmm.
right? To get faster for an Ironman that you're going to do in 16, 20 weeks, well, that comes prior to your race preparation phase. Um, and to get faster, it's like I'm at the point where if I want to move the dial on my 5K time, I probably have to spend a whole year developing speed and power, speed and power. That means high intensity workouts, short duration. But once I get there, it's easy to maintain it, right?
Okay.
And it doesn't really, if you maintain it with like a little bit of zone 4 work, a little bit of zone 5 work, you can maintain that speed that you've gained and that power, like a 20-minute FTP, you can maintain that on s- surprisingly not as much work as you would think.
Hmm.
It's the stamina portion that takes time, but you can't maintain stamina forever. Right? You can build the stamina for, say, an Ironman in 12, 16, 20 weeks, depending on the individual, but you can't maintain that for several weeks at a time beyond after you've done that. You do have to come back down before you go back up. The body's just not gonna allow for that for an extended period of time.
I mean, it sounds like, it's first of all, you have to figure out your why,
Mhm.
right? Why are you doing something? And then you have to figure out what the goal is in it, right? I mean, are you looking for speed? Are you looking for shorter distance races? Are you looking for more endurance type things? I mean, it's just kind of figuring all that out and then working with somebody like yourself to figure out, how to prepare yourself for it, using the data, using the metrics. But this leads me into my first question because based on your philosophy, and I love this quote. I can't remember exactly where you wrote it or where I read it, but you wrote, I want to inspire people. I want someone to look at me and say, because of you, I didn't give up.
Mhm.
So this is really, I know the performance metrics are important, and that's the outcome part of it, but there has to be this like kind of person-centered approach to it. So we're calling it mentorship, I guess, rather than simply performance improvement. So my first question to you is, in terms of your coaching philosophy, why mentorship? How does that work? Because we know the performance metrics and the data is important. Like you said, you trust the data to know you're prepared for something. But what's the other side of it till people
It's
are successful at this?
Yeah, it's being, at the end of the day, it's for me, it's leading, I say inspire others by, leading by example. Sharing my good days, my bad days. A lot of folks, they look at podiums and PRs, but they don't look what's below the surface. They're just seeing the tip of the iceberg, but underneath is, sacrifice. It's showing up. It's having bad training days, having bad training weeks, having bad training seasons, right?
Mhm.
But it's that consistency of just showing up no matter what life throws at you, just showing up and saying, well, what can I do today? I'm supposed to do intervals today, and yeah, I want to do those, but my body's telling me otherwise, or I'm just in the stage of life where I'm just so, I got a newborn child and I'm just so exhausted all the time. And exercise is feeling like a chore. How do I get that joy back? Oh, I know. I'm going to take off my watch and I'm just going to go for a run. And my body's going to tell me, you know, what pace I should do. Maybe I pick it up and the body says, okay, yeah, I can handle this today. Or I go for a pickup and the body says, not happening. And instead of feeling defeated and deflated, it's just changing that mindset. Well, I'm just going to continue on because I do like being outside. Um, I work with people all day. It's my time and I have a family. It's my time to disconnect. Right?
Hmm.
People ask me to go for group runs and stuff like that, and I'm like, that's the only hour of my day that I get to myself. And I'm not, I'll do an extra run to run with you, but I'm not giving up my 1 hour of freedom, if you will. Some parents might want to choose to read a book at that time. I want to go out and connect with nature, taking, now it's spring here and the trees are budding. So there's like this smell in the air and I love it. Um,
Just not
you know,
today.
just not today. Yeah, we got snow instead.
That's so bad. Well, no, but but what you're saying, again, back to the PhD journey, like it's like that takes a lot for, and I don't know if people understand it. It takes a lot to set boundaries in your life. It doesn't necessarily come natural to a lot of people,
No.
right? And so, how do you emphasize how important that is? Because you're asking for an hour, and you're saying it's a non-negotiable hour.
Yeah.
How do you get there? Because I think that's hard for people. I think that sometimes life controls us, and we need to learn to control life to a certain degree. I know you can't technically control life, but you can control, like, setting time aside in the morning to go out for your runs, or going to the gym and making sure that that is consistent. When we talk about
Mhm.
consistency and discipline, you can make those decisions to control that, put those boundaries in your life. But I think that's tough. As a coach, do you see that people struggle with that?
They do, and all the, if I look at the gym where I worked with, everyday people, not
Mhm.
athletes, just everyday people. Athletes are a joy to work with because they're goal oriented, so they're going to do their homework. But when you work with the general population, they're not always as driven as say an athlete, and trying to help them set their goals, stick to their program. Life happens. They want to work out at 10 a.m. and it's like, well, they're working and then they budget the time, but then something pops up that's, kind of a work emergency, if you will, or it's just something that I got to get this done. I can't, I'm going to have to let go of my workout. When I step back and I look at everybody that I have had the opportunity and the joy of working with in some way, shape, or form, statistically speaking, those that exercise first thing in the morning tend to get the best results. Not to say like I've trained people in the afternoon and then in the evening and they do get good results. When I'm stepping back and looking at everybody across the spectrum, and I group, okay, everybody I worked with in the morning versus middle of the day versus end of the day, and I say to statistically who's had the best results, it's my early morning folks, that get it in,
Are you talking
that
about
get,
performance result? Or are you
we're
saying
just
just not getting
health.
distracted and
Yeah, not
saying
getting
it's not a
distracted and
priority
needing to
today?
get it in. Yeah.
I think that I think it's
Yeah,
because,
those that, come to me, I want to lose weight, I want to put on
right,
muscle.
because
Okay, yeah, I can only impact you if you're paying, if you're buying 2 sessions a week, I can only control 2 of your hours,
yeah,
right?
it's true.
Um, and then, they're consistent because they don't want to lose the session. So they're consistently showing up then, but then on the other days, life is starting to get in the way, and it's like having that tough conversation. Okay, I want to keep you on track. We're getting in 2 days, and then you're not getting in anything else. Where else could we fit this in? Could you get up early in the morning, um, and come in then? Is there something that you could do outside of your house, right? You don't have to necessarily come to the gym. I want you to just walk or do run walk intervals or,
Hmm.
whatever may be appropriate for that individual.
I also think when you get up early in the morning, you have control of that time.
Yes.
When you start your day, you go to work. You really don't have, I mean, you don't know what might come across your desk. You don't know what, and sitting, and maybe you make a poor choice at lunch, and it's all these things, right? And then by the end of the day, it's the motivation. Back to the motivation, you have to fall back on discipline, and it's hard. It's hard. I mean, I used for many years, I would go straight after work, straight to the YMCA, right next to work at, 5, 6 o'clock at night. I wouldn't go home. I'd say go straight there. And that took a lot of effort. So
Yeah.
and I've done early morning too. And I think you're right. It's done and and then you go about your day. Um, Depending on what you're training for, right? So if you are training for, I guess, an Ironman or something like that, then your training sessions, maybe you're doing 2 or 3 a day,
Yeah, you might be
but you've
doing two
worked
a
your
day.
lifestyle around it.
Yeah,
So,
and just 2 a days. It's not going to be every day. So it's important to talk with the athlete and say, okay, what days can I get a
right.
little bit more time out of you to fit in two workouts? It's generally three times a week. Put strength training on top of that. Yeah, it could be more than that.
But
Um,
but do you see, I'm just curious because I haven't really researched this. Do you see um not only more success for early morning workouts in terms of consistency, do you see better results in terms of performance? Does it matter, do you think?
yes
Or
and
weight
no.
loss or
Yes and
speed
no.
work
Like
or
my athletes, to work out first thing in the morning, your body's not quite fully awake. You can still push some hard intervals. If I was to wait till 8 a.m. or some of my athletes that work out early in the morning, when it's the weekend comes around, they feel much better hitting their intervals between 8 and 10 a.m., depending on when they start out, versus say 5 or 5:30 a.m. You're sacrificing a little bit there by exercising super early, but it's controllable and you're more likely to be consistent at let's say 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning than you might be at 8 o'clock when the day starts to really begin, or 10 o'clock. And it's that consistency over time that I think generates the best results. If we were professional athletes, yeah, we'd probably be better off training at 10 a.m. When
Mhm.
we're fully awoke, we've had a good meal, and all of those things. Yeah, we could perform a little bit better than when we're just getting out of bed and we're still waking up.
Well, I have a good friend, and if you listen to this, he's a friend from school. He just launched a podcast called The Next Set, Dr. Tahir, and he just posted something. He just started working out at 3 a.m. because his schedule. And he said at first it just, brutal. And then he said, but now he's grown to love it. It's quiet. He's in control of that time. I'm not
Mhm.
suggesting everybody needs to work out at 3 a.m., but I think the point that Brady and I are getting at is to have some success with things in your life. Sometimes you have to figure out how to prioritize them and find the time and set the boundaries and make that space non-negotiable for yourself. Listen, for the PhD journey, and I'm not saying this was the best way to do this either. My life was busy. My life didn't just go on hold. I did a PhD around my life, and it was early, early mornings and late, late, late at night, and that's when it fit in.
Mhm.
So I mean, it's life. But I think back to that original statement that you said to me before we even started today is just about the discipline. When motivation's tough, it's the discipline and finding and getting yourself up early and make and being consistent with things. So it, it feels a little easier said than done, but I
Yes.
think I think that people such as yourself help us stay on track.
And being 40 years old now, I got into triathlon in 2012 when I didn't have kids, so I
Mhm.
was working out in the afternoons or after work, right? Because I could go to bed and I didn't have to wake up early. I mean, I would wake up early, but I didn't have to wake up too early to get in a workout. So it's like where now it's like, if I work out in the afternoon or work out in the evening, yeah, I can get it in, but now it's impacting my sleep because I'm still going to end up waking up. My body clock's going to get me up between 4 and 4:30 every morning. And if I work out at 6 o'clock and I finish at 7, it's hard for me to fall asleep before 10, but my body's still going to wake me up at 4:30. Whereas when I was younger, I didn't have the kids and the responsibilities and I just had to work. Yeah, I
Right.
could work out after work and going to bed is 10, no big deal. I would be waking up at 7 o'clock, getting ready to run out the door for work. So things change, and we just have to be able to adapt and pivot and problem solve, and
Pivot.
just kind of put the pieces together. What can we control? What can't we control?
Yeah, I think that's the key to success here with whatever you're going after and what this conversation's all about. We're framing it within athletics, endurance sports, or marathons and or speed work, or shorter distance. I mean, whatever it is athletically. I think that you have to set these habits in place to be successful. And at first, it feels a little uncomfortable, but then over time, it gives you peace because you fall into the structure and this routine. I'm curious, with the athletes that you train. Do you set like you should go to bed by a certain time? Talk about rest and fatigue a bit. What does that look
Yeah.
like?
Um,
Because I think that's a
it's
huge.
just important to make sure that they, having that open conversation with the athlete and making sure that they are getting restful sleep.
Mhm.
They're not having trouble falling asleep. If they are having trouble falling asleep, well, what is it? Is it because we're exercising too late? Are we starting to overtrain a little bit and we need to pull back? Because those are some of those warning signs that we might be overtraining. Is like we're sleeping, but we're not getting restful sleep. We're having trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. Stress, just life stress can do that to you too, but it's when when you see it as a consistent pattern that okay, this might be just overtraining versus it happened, it's just a stressful week, right?
Mhm.
And just being able to recognize that difference.
So for sleep habits, what do you from your ACSM training and from being a coach and being an athlete yourself? What does that look like?
Yeah,
Can you give a general and by
seven
the
to eight and a
way,
half hours.
I'm sorry, say it one more time.
Seven and a half to 8.5 hours is the ideal spot. As Americans, we're very underslept. I would have clients in the gym or just athletes that they're only able to get in 6 hours of sleep. So it's like those athletes that aren't getting the ideal sleep, it's they need, and I wasn't when I was raising two young kids when they were, you know, when Declan was 4, Zoe was 2. And that was the thick of it. And it's just like, okay, well, I can't go out there and hit the workout the way I intended, but I can still go out and move my body. It's just going to be different. And I think that's where like it didn't feel like a chore then to work out, but it felt like it just didn't have that drive, like that motivation to do the intervals. But I did have the motivation to get out and
Mhm.
disconnect and move my body because I knew at the end of the day, even if I stayed, let's say, zone 2 and nice and easy, I was going to feel better and I was going to be more prepared to take on the day. It's going to be clear-minded. It's going to be less stressed. It was probably the hardest thing I was going to do all day. It's usually the workout, so it sets the tone for the day.
Well, the other thing about the sleep, and from your certification, because we were saying in the beginning, American College of Sports Medicine really focuses on exercise in terms of as medicine for good health and longevity. Lack of sleep not only can impact performance in terms of athletics, or just performance on your job or anything. I think it leads can lead to health problems,
Oh, absolutely.
secondary things that, when you don't exercise, and Brady knows those too, when you don't exercise, when you don't have good nutrition, when you don't have good sleep habits, when you don't find ways to manage stress, if you have one of these things and it becomes, chronic and long term, it can really wreak havoc on your body. If you have all of those, you know, it's really it breaks down the system, right? It breaks down your health and fit and overall well-being. So all these pieces fit together for optimal health and performance, but sleep, and I've heard and I've read some of the research, things like Alzheimer's disease and just different things. It really can impair your cognitive
Cortisol,
performance.
right? When cortisol is present, um, your body's blood sugar is generally higher.
Okay.
And you could be eating a healthy diet. This happened to me. I was a couple years ago, I was gaining weight and my diet doesn't change. So my doctor said, your insurance is going to cover a bit. I'm curious. And it was a fasting glucose that, sounded the alarm, right? My fasting glucose was 105, which nothing to worry about. But he said, for you, the way you eat, he knows me very well. The way you eat, exercise, something seems off. So he suggested I wear a glucose monitor for a couple of weeks just to kind of get a read on, because his suspicion was I was, really stressed out and, blood sugar was going to be elevated because cortisol was high, right? We didn't test for
That's
cortisol, but
that. One
it was
second. One
fascinating to
second.
see.
1 second. That I did not know that actually. That's really interesting. So the relationship between cortisol and
And blood
glucose.
sugar.
So
Yeah.
long term, being under stress for long periods of time can has an impact on elevating glucose levels.
hmm
Wow.
Yeah, it was
What a
fascinating to see because I could see, okay, my breakfast doesn't change. I eat the same thing 7 days a week.
right.
My dinner, well, it changes. Dinner is about the only thing that changes, but it's protein, veggie, and starch or something like
Hmm.
that. Or, it's pretty basic. Um, but it was interesting to see the rise in glucose and the crash and how luck, if glucose came up when I was stressed out, that it came down. Like this was, Monday through Friday versus the weekend, right? And the
Hmm.
weekends I eat, pretty much the same. Or I would have a cheat meal Friday night. But you know what? I'd have a cheat meal Friday night and my overnight glucose would be in the 80s.
That's
Having a cheat
interesting.
meal
Good.
because the stress was gone, right? So he saw this pattern. He said, after 2 weeks, he said, okay, I got enough information. He's like, I want to come over and chat, and we chatted and he's like, okay, I want to talk about the stress in your life. And I told him everything that was going on. And he's like, as a physician, because as a coach, I'm working with people all day long and
Right.
answering emails and, and trying to get the work done, if you will. It was a free for all. This was a few years back. It was a free for all where I was trying to juggle wearing all these different hats. And he says, as a physician, the hardest part of our job is charting, right? So he's like, you need to budget for that, and helped me kind of, looked at my schedule and everything that was going on in my life and where can we
I've
fit
heard
in,
that. I've heard that from a friend of
throughout the
mine.
day where,
Hmm.
and it could be as simple as blocking off 30 minutes at say
Right.
9:15 to 9:45 to this is and I get the message emails. Oh, okay, I'm going to do emails at this time, right?
Hmm.
When I set those kind of boundaries and time blocks, if you will,
Hmm.
the stress just kind of because I knew
Oh,
I had a chance to do everything that needed to get done in a week because it was mapped out.
okay.
Right? Exercise didn't change because that was in the morning. But I work with some parents that have different, rotating schedules, nurses. So it's looking at the whole week and all the obligations and where can we move? It's like a puzzle. Where can we
Mhm.
put things together where we can, buffer this? If they are working out for an hour midday, we'll buffer an hour and a half because chances are you're going to have to respond to an email, a text message, or something like that, and that's going to cut into if you buffer an hour and a half for a midday workout, chances are you'll get it in. You might not shower,
But
but
but when you wore that glucose monitor and you started to do the block, for I guess the equivalent of
yeah,
charting as physicians, did your glucose come down?
it dropped. Yeah, the overnight dropped. Yeah, it was
Oh,
fascinating. It was just
that
fascinating to
is
see. I
very
couldn't I couldn't
fascinating.
tell, right? I felt the stress go away because I said, okay, I've budgeted to do these things and to do these tasks and to get these deliverables out. I've budgeted for that. And why didn't I think of that before? I guess I've had a lot of mentors in my life too, and I'm
Well,
always into that.
we're always learning, we're always growing. And I have a very good friend from school who's an ER physician who went back to get his PhD. And he used to say the charting takes a lot of time, you know. So that's so interesting. And the data gave you that feedback. So that's where we can balance like the performance metrics, the data and training prepares you for a race day, but there's also the reality of life and having to adapt to life and understanding that we have stress and all these kind of things. But such a great, powerful example of how the data can really help you improve your health. And so
Yeah, it's like
that's interesting,
say to people, I'm like, we're so lucky to live in the times that we do because we have
right?
access to all these things. Whereas, well, let's stress, our parents, my parents were stressed out, but it was different then, right? It
Right,
was different. My parents didn't need two full-time incomes to survive. We do.
right.
Um,
Well,
and,
but
and
and you
that's
also
probably because I chose this as my profession, but I'm
well,
willing to give up income to help others to have satisfaction and love what I do.
I understand that. And but you also did say it's also important at times just to get all the data, put it away, and
Yes.
just go be
Yeah,
with
to
the
use it
element.
as
I
a
call them the
guide, but not to
elements.
obsess over
Yeah.
it, right? Use it as a guide. Look for trends that can help improve your life.
One quick
Not
question.
obsess over
Go
these
ahead.
things, but look for, I was sharing with my Whoop data with my doctor and stuff, and he's like, and some of the metrics, and he goes, he's like, don't obsess over that. I was like, oh no, I'm not. I see these trends, I see these warning signs before I'm about to, about 3 days before I get sick. I start to see a
Oh,
trend. So I know when to, I still want to exercise, but I know when to pull back and go easy and move things around. So yeah, maybe those higher intensity sessions are going to be later on if it's Monday. Maybe by Friday I'll bounce back. The data is telling me that I may not be getting sick any of these times. I don't know, but I've been tracking the data for enough time that I can start to see some of these warning signs or some of the athletes I coach. Like I have one that, is prone to having low iron. And I can see things in her data at her exercise intensities when her heart rate's normally at X pace, it's normally between 140 and 145. And when I start to see over a few weeks that's starting to come up, I say, hey, so and so think it's time for you to get your iron checked. And lo
wow.
and behold, and I can see it in her notes, right? That felt harder than it should. And we just see this trend over time that we go, can I ask you a question? When you go into your Garmin and you look at your VO2 max, is it starting to come down? Yeah, it is. How'd you know? I'm starting to see the warning signs in the data that I'm seeing.
That's
And we use it as a guide to help us. And then I was able
that
to shift her training. She's a new mother. She's got a 2-year-old now, and when she hired me, she got a goal to qualify for Boston, but she also wants to have a second child. So it's like, how do we make these things possible? I got 2 years to do it. I said, well, I think I can catch you there. Um,
adapt, balance.
but you're not doing two, she wanted to do 2 marathons a year. I said,
Let me
if
ask
you do two
let,
marathons a year, it's going to take a little bit longer to get there.
wait, let me ask you one quick question because
Yeah.
I'm scared I'm gonna forget I'm having these mental blocks today. Um with the glucose. That's one more thing with the
Yes.
glucose. Stress, but so you said the whoop, right? So I
Yeah.
guess you monitor your sleep.
Yep.
Did you find any relationship with lack of sleep and those glucose levels?
No, the sleep was good. The sleep was
You
good. I
didn't
was
see any
getting
relationship
enough. I'd
there?
be getting 6.5 hours. Still getting plenty of REM sleep, still getting plenty of deep sleep.
So that wasn't impacting those
So
all
yeah, that
the
wasn't
okay, I was just curious.
impacting it.
I was
Yeah.
curious sleep was impacting that in any way. Because I do know there's some research like people who work like when you mess with your circadian rhythm
Hmm.
and if you work the overnight shifts and you do have lack of sleep, there seems to be some relationship with metabolic disorders like diabetes and things
Yes.
like that. So
Yeah, that's true.
um okay, and then the other thing is you said with the Whoop data, and like with your athletes, you can tell some of the warning signs, I guess, to pull back. What besides the VO2 max, what would that be? What are you
I would
seeing?
notice that her notes would be, that felt hard, and then I would, harder than it should, and then that was a consistent. Okay, we all have those workouts where like, oh, that just felt harder than it should. No big deal. It's
Okay,
we got training fatigue and stuff, but when it comes a pattern over 2, 3 weeks, that's like,
something's
oh,
off.
let me look at these other metrics. Let me really analyze your heart rate at different points of time at different paces. And let me check the weather conditions to take that out of it to make sure weather wasn't a factor. That wasn't a hot day or something like that. And it's like you start to see these trends, and it's like, oh, okay, something's going on here. And how's the stress in your life? How's your sleep? And then
Interesting.
I worked with her for it's been just over 2 years, so I started to really get to know her habits and stuff like that. So I just knew what to look for.
Right.
Uh,
That's so interesting. So
yeah.
much of this conversation is about adaptation and just like adapting,
Being
it
able to
being
pivot.
consistent, having the discipline, doing the hard work, but also adapting to like, because life is dynamic. It's not just, and I think that, I was in the beginning, we talk about performance. I mean, it isn't just linear. I always like to say, life isn't a straight path. We got these curves and all kinds of stuff, fun stuff happens out on those, curves,
Yeah.
but it's the same thing with training for sport and training for life. I want to ask you about, in terms of mentoring athletes, about identity. Okay,
Mhm.
so I want to switch a little bit.
Yes.
You know, what does that look like for your athletes? How do they, how do you keep it in check? How do you keep these balances in your life? And you know, don't beat yourself up when the performance metrics are not looking the way you want, or you didn't get a PR. I mean, you have a very healthy, positive attitude about it. Oh, you look for opportunities to when you run, to keep it fun or to keep the spark alive. But how do you help athletes or people just in life not just beat themselves up if they're just not where they want to be at a certain point in time?
Yeah, it's when I meet a new athlete, it's like understanding their why. They have this goal, and why is it? Well, I've always wanted to do this. I've always wanted to do an Ironman, or I've always wanted to do a marathon. That might be their why. And usually when that's their why, I've always wanted to do an Ironman or a marathon, they're not chasing a time. They just want to
Okay.
finish and not be
I want to
humbled.
finish.
Okay, great. So when life gets hard, it's just, and things come up, it's just reminding them of, okay, you made this commitment. Um, I know you're having a tough week. How can I meet you where you're at? You still have to do the work, but how can I keep you on track? Like, um, I can help them adjust their schedule. Okay, we can't get in all 8 workouts this week, but here's your 4 priorities. I'd really like you to knock out 5 workouts, but these are your 4 must-dos.
Hmm.
Where can we fit these in? How's Tuesday? Today we're recording is Tuesday. How's today look? What's tomorrow look like for you? What does this weekend look like for you? And how can we help prioritize those things to keep the athlete on track, right? We can always we can always do intensity later, right? If they're having a stressful week, okay, we're gonna go easy. We'll do moderate intensity. We'll try to pick it up later on in the week when maybe things will get better, or maybe next week was sometimes on their down weeks. That ends up being an up week because the week before their down week, they're having a down week just because life happens, right? And it's
Hmm.
just being able to move those macro cycles around and keep them on track, keep their I call it normalized training stress because I coach on TriDot. So we look at training stress a little different. So just keeping that on track, that it's not jumping, it's not dropping too much, it's consistent when they're going for that marathon, that Ironman, half Iron, whatever it is that their goal is, right? And then these are the athletes that just want to finish versus those that win a PR, that's a different mindset altogether.
Hmm. What's it feel like when they come back to you and you get them through that hump, or you get them through that
Yeah, I
wall?
tell them it's
What's
it's
it feel like?
temporary. It's temporary. It may
No,
not
for
seem fun
you, for
because oh
you
yeah,
as the coach. What's it feel like for
yeah,
you?
amazing. It's so rewarding. It's like I just help them solve a problem and keep them on their goals and keep I motivated them to it's okay to go easy. It's okay to go easy this week. Your body's telling you that. Be kind to it. It's gonna bounce back. It's temporary. This will pass. And there's still a lot we can do. And usually they're consistent up until that point, right? When life goes haywire for a month, it's like, well, if I look back at your last 3 months, you were like knocking them out of the park, very consistent, right? This is just a small dip in your endurance ocean, right? This is just a little dip, a
Endurance
little tough
ocean.
part, but you're still moving your body. You're still maintaining. Yeah, you might be losing some of your speed, right? We can get that back, and we will. We just got to get over this hump, and here's how we're gonna do it.
We're really teaching life lessons for the long game.
It's the long game, right? It's
It
the
really
long
is.
game.
It's the
And the
long
last thing I
game.
want to see is an athlete burn out, right? And
Hmm.
sometimes it's like maybe it doesn't make sense to run this marathon, this spring. Let's look at something in the fall. And the con is, yes, we're moving your goal out a little bit further, But the pro is your workouts are going to be shorter now. You can fit more in. And after a period of time, we can bring up the intensity because you're not training for volume, you're training for speed right now. So we can push this off and that's okay. It's still going to be there. There's still going to be another race. And just reminding them that because sometimes they just get so focused on it has to be this one and it's yeah, it's nice to have that, but it's like, okay, we're looking at a marathon in say April, because I'm only saying that because Boston. But if things aren't going according to plan, how can we pivot? What other, I start researching for them.
Mhm.
What if I know their life starts getting crazy? Well, after Boston, if that was their race and they were trying to be coup for next year, well, what other options do they have? Could I, what's in May, right? Um,
We're
and kind of
teaching
doing that research
we're
for
teaching
them.
life lessons.
Hmm.
These are life lessons. We're learning them through sport, but they're life lessons on resilience. Ryan Holiday wrote the book The Obstacle is the Way. Sometimes it's not always linear. It's we're learning so many lessons about ourselves and you know and life gets sticky sometimes, like it doesn't, things happen. And so you do have to pivot, you do have to adapt. And how do you help? I mean, what does that look like if somebody's training for something and you come to them and you say, I mean, that's a hard pill to swallow. Like, we might not do this. We might have to
Yeah.
go out 6 months. Like, what does that
Yeah.
look like?
It's
I
a hard
mean,
discussion to
that's a
have.
hard discussion. I think I would have tears and you would feel like you want to quit. So how
Yeah,
do you help people
it's
not
easy.
quit?
It's easy to get discouraged, and and if somebody doesn't have somebody in their corner, some people, some of those performance athletes they'll just give up and they'll stop training altogether. Whereas it's like if you have someone in your corner that can change your mindset and say, we can still finish Boston, we can still finish this marathon. It might not be the time that you're banking on. So here's my suggestion.
Hmm.
To get you enough fitness to finish Boston. We'll have a shorter recovery period if you don't go out and race it. We can look at something towards the middle or end of May. There's enough time to recover, do another build, peak, and then taper for this event. Or it might maybe everything, got lost along the way and the goal is just not even there. It's like, hey, let's look at something later on and here's the pros and cons, right? But that A goal that you had, the data is telling me it's not. In data and years of coaching in the sport just tell me it's not in the cards this April. It's not there. Um, you go for it and you don't listen to me, yeah, you're gonna have a great 14, 16 miles. Then it's gonna go very, very bad. And that's gonna be discouraging.
Yeah.
Or we can change our mindset, just finish, have a good time, and we can put another carrot further out that you can chase, right? And that usually keeps that spark alive. Okay, yeah, and then they'll change their mindset. Okay, I'm okay with this. Yes, it wasn't what I set out to do, but I've just changed them to now looking forward to that next race that hopefully things will change, and get them excited about, well, the pros is we get to develop. We get to build your gas tank a little bit bigger before we go to this. Now that time you were chasing is going to be a little bit easier to achieve because you have more time to develop speed. Whereas right now we're running on the razor's edge. Bigger gas tank. Now instead of running at say 94%, now we can run at 93 and still hit that same time goal.
Pe- People are really, I feel like it's a blessing to work with a coach, to have that opportunity. And not everybody has the means to do that. And so coming on like a podcast like such as myself, sharing your knowledge and your wisdoms and your based on your experiences, it just so grateful to have that. So thank you. And
Yeah,
because
it's
I
gonna
think that's,
resonate with people that they're gonna have some aha moments that they can take away from this.
yeah, because I think that's
And
that's the beauty of the podcast. That's the whole reason to have it, to educate
it's so
people,
accessible. Yeah.
to make it more accessible because maybe not, you don't have the resources to have a coach, but there are people out there like Brady who love what they do, who want you to be successful, who understand it, the science behind it, the emotional aspect of it, the whole comprehensive picture of it. So if somebody wants to reach out to you as a coach, are you taking new clients now?
Um, I might be after April. Yeah,
Okay.
because with my profession, I work for TriDot, which is a AI-based training system platform. And because I used to coach on TriDot and then I coached on TriDot 2019, I found out about it and then I brought my athletes over because it allowed me to, instead of writing training plans, the AI could do it so that I could coach and educate and problem
Mhm.
solve. 6 hours of my day was programming before then on every Friday. It was like, okay, now that I can give that up, now I can really spend time, a lot more face time with my athletes,
Right.
communicating on a deeper level and really helping them. It's like I like to say, I could coach somebody that has a training plan on a paper napkin, right? As long as they have something to follow,
Right.
coaching isn't writing the training plan. It's everything else. It's everything else.
Exactly. It's all
Um,
the days that we don't want to show up.
so as a result of that, I have a cap of how many athletes I can work with at one time. Um, so yeah, I'm pretty sure I have a spot opening up after the Boston Marathon because I have one athlete.
Okay.
He's a family man. He's got two young kids. He's in my shoes several years back. That's what he's going through now. His goal is to just finish Boston. He's had a hard time putting in the miles. We've got a bare minimum enough miles that he's going to finish. We've changed it from a run Boston to a run walk Boston. So we changed his mindset a little bit because life got in the way and he was killing himself. And I said, is it really worth, you're going into all these workouts like not rested. And he had some warning signs early on of what could have resulted in an injury. And I said, we got to pull back. We got to get you cross training. Um, you're just it's not like he was doing too much. He just wasn't recovering because he just had so much going on in his life. And needless to say, um, he's kind of hinted at that after Boston, he needs some time to, just not have structure. And I'm
Hmm.
like, I get it. I get it. That allows me to help somebody else.
Yeah, it's like riding the waves of life.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have
And every
to
time I lose a client,
push.
I don't try to keep them. I say, they'll come to me, oh, I feel really bad. I'm not going to continue. Like, you've taught me so much, and I think I can do some of this on my own. And I'm like, great. That's my goal in life is to hear that because it allows me to help somebody else.
Hmm. Yep. Let me ask you this as we wrap up. And we had talked about going a little bit longer today because there's just so much here. So, um, what would you like to say as far as just encouraging people to live their best lives, to never give up on themselves, to put themselves into spaces that might feel uncomfortable, but might be incredibly rewarding and fulfilling? How do we, what do you want, what kind of wisdom do you want to give people from, all your coaching experience and life experiences up to this point?
Yeah, look at your goals. Why is it that you want to do what you want to do? What's your goal? What's your ultimate goal, right? What's your why behind it? And I say that's your a goal, right? In a perfect world, and then it's like, well, if you bounce it off a coach, they'll tell you if it's achievable or not, if it's a big stretch or a little stretch, and a little stretch I'm okay with. Um, what's a B goal? What's a C goal and what's a last resort?
Okay.
Um, and then as you get plugging away, and if things are just not as planned, what goal can I set a little further down the road when I hope that this too shall pass? And what am I okay with? All right, that's where we have that acceptance goal. The athlete that's running Boston just wants to finish now and not be totally humbled by the marathon and not be beaten up. Um, and then it's like, well, he still got the fall. He had a time goal in mind. Then he had a couple time goals, and not all of those are. And I was like, I get it. I've been there. You can't control it. Um, his wife travels for work, so that makes it hard to be very, very consistent. But at the end of the day, this too shall pass. You're doing this because It's your time alone. For him, it's just like me. It's this time alone to
Hmm.
disconnect. Um, Likes the process, just likes moving his body. Um, Taught him some cross training because of the potential injury. It's just being adaptable and staying focused. Sometimes you have to move goals, and that's okay. It's that
Good.
consistency, your consistency over time is what's going to pay off in the long run.
Hmm.
And that's with anything.
Hmm. That's great. That's perfect.
As a coach and a trainer, it's like I have to do continuing education credits, every couple of years. So it's like, where do I budget that in? Well, I come up with a plan. I could pay USA Triathlon $40 for an hour CEU that just gives me an introduction to a topic. But I'd rather take a 20 or 30-hour course and actually learn something and put a credential to where can I budget that time, right? And
Hmm.
I keep saying I'm going to do FMS, and I'm like, well, might not be, I just don't have the time for it now, but well, what can I do that can get me there? Well, I can take, this shorter course that will give me kind of the foundation and introduction to what it is I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And see where things are at. We're coming up to summer and the sports schedules won't be as crazy. So maybe I'll be able to budget a little bit more time to pursue that because it's ultimately it's going to keep me growing as a coach, but it's going to allow me to help others in another way.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to wrap up today is to understand that, you can't do everything, right? And when you try to do everything, you start to experience stress.
Yes.
Okay. And so you have to think about making space in your life for your goals.
Yes.
And they're different for all of us.
It doesn't have to be athletic. It
And
could
it does
be
not,
it
right,
can be a hobby. We want to still enjoy that hobby,
right,
and we don't want that hobby to be a chore.
right,
When it
right.
becomes a chore, we got to change our mindset.
Well, this was good. I learned so much listening to you, and I'd love to have your dad and you back on the show together. I'd love to talk to him about what it was like in the early years. That would be
Yeah, I would
awesome.
like to hear a little bit more of his
Let's
story
do
too.
it and see if
Yeah.
he's game, and we'll
Yeah.
get him on. Brady, thank you so much for spending time with us on the PhD Journey Unplugged. Do you want to share an email how can people find you if
Oh,
they want
yes.
to? Go ahead.
My Instagram handle, probably the best way to get in touch. It's Brady Hoover 140.6.
Okay. And we wish you all the best going into Boston. I want to hear about it, how it goes. And
Thanks.
any new lessons, because I'm sure there's always something new to learn when we put
Uh-huh.
ourselves out there. And that's what life's about. That's the beauty of life, is to keeping our heart and our minds and everything about ourselves open to learning new things and to embracing the community. I wanted to emphasize because you said that, like when you were running and high-fiving people and seeing friends along the way, so much of this whole conversation and life is, embrace the community around you, ask people for help,
Hmm.
reach out to other people. It makes the human experience so much more positive and helps us get through things sometimes when we have challenges in our lives. So with that, so grateful to have this platform to educate and motivate on the PhD Journey Unplugged podcast. Thank you, Brady Hoover, and we'll be back soon. All right,
Yes,
everybody.
absolutely.
Bye.